Hey, good Saturday afternoon. Carl Rominger here coming live. I was in on Thursday filling in for Bob Durgan doing the flood coverage, and obviously it's still going on. I mean, I see Tom Donovan running around the studio here, so this is the news and the updates you're getting are live and up to date, just so you know that. 540-0580 is the talk line number if you have a legal question, you want to talk about the law. I'm going to be in trial in Lancaster this Monday. I'm not sure which courtroom. We don't have an assignment yet, but I'll keep that posted on Facebook. So if you're bored and want to come watch a trial, just come down to Lancaster County. You're welcome. They're always open to the public, and it's trial week down there. So if you want to even just filter into the courthouse and see your justice system in action, you can. It's criminal trial week. But if you have a legal question today and you want to get it answered on the air, go call us right here, 540-0580, and I will talk about it. And I also want to respond to, I had a caller on Thursday who wanted to yell at me because I was saying how inconsistent I thought folks were on their views on socialized medicine and Obamacare. And just to prove my point, he called up and got mad at me because I was criticizing Medicare and people getting Medicare, and that's the only system available to seniors, et cetera, et cetera. And then he was getting mad at me for saying, that was intellectually inconsistent. But here's my point, and I want to reiterate it. It's amazing how everybody's opposed to one-payer health care, everybody's opposed to centralized health care, and whether you're for it or against it, I don't really care. That's not my point. But my point is everybody, when they hit 60 whatever or 50 whatever, that they can get Medicare and then get Social Security, all of a sudden they're in favor of those social programs. And really, they're just versions of socialized medicine. So if you're out there and you're on Medicare, it's fine. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that if you say that socialized medicine is akin to communism and the fact that we've even talked about a one-payer system means that the government's a bunch of wacky communists, then you should immediately cease and desist from using Medicare or Social Security because those are, as Ron Paul says, organs of the welfare state, unconstitutional, and otherwise not something that a good conservative should be taking. But I suspect that most of the good conservatives listening today, if they're the right age, do in fact take them. So if anyone wants to talk about that, I'm happy to talk about that too. 540-0580, which also reminds me, while we're on Ron Paul for a second, reminds me of Rick Perry coming out the other day, and one of his quotes was that Social Security is like a Ponzi scheme. And I'm willing to bet that if we wait a few weeks here, we will see that Rick Perry changes tact a little bit and becomes much more conciliatory towards the Social Security schema that we have here in the United States, because the average Republican voter is probably not agreeing with him. More importantly, the average voter in America tends to be older and therefore more likely to fall into the branch of folks who accept Social Security on a regular basis. And whether it's a Ponzi scheme or not, they're not going to be in favor of any politician who suggests that he's about to dismantle what was once called the third rail politics. So anyhow, that's enough politics for today, unless, of course, you guys want to talk about it, 540-0580. And I know I got some calls coming up now, so when we get you on here in a minute after Shane screens you. What else I want to talk to you guys about? Have you been paying attention to the court system and what's going on with this case about eyewitnesses? And I think I mentioned this before, but I will again. There's actually a court case being considered whether or not eyewitness testimony alone would be sufficient for a criminal conviction to be based upon. And so it's a complete change from where we used to be, where people thought that eyewitness testimony was the best testimony. We're now moving back to where we realize that eyewitness testimony is, in fact, the worst kind of testimony possible, that people perceive things wrong. That's where objective things like video cameras come in so that we can all see what really happened, not what the police officer or the witness or the victim thought they saw. David, you're on WHP 580 with Carl Rominger.
Hi, I just had a question about starting a business in Pennsylvania, a small business.
Yeah.
Should I get a lawyer, or is that something I can just go to the courthouse and take care of?
Well, you don't really start a business at the courthouse. Let me start off right there. In order to start a business in Pennsylvania, and what kind of business are we talking about? Service business or retail?
Service, handyman kind of thing.
Okay, handyman. Well, first of all, you should see a lawyer then, because you're going to need to get a number. In order to do any contracting or construction work in Pennsylvania, you got to register with the Attorney General's office. Mm-hmm. The other thing that a lawyer would want to do probably for you is decide whether you want to be a sole proprietorship or whether you should create a limited liability company or an S-corp or something along those lines to protect yourself and your assets. Also, they probably want to talk to you about just kind of what the tax consequences, and not like literally what they are, but what types of filings you'd have to do, and whether you're going to want to interface with a CPA. So, for instance, if you're a self-employed guy, you fill out a Schedule C, but if you have a LLC, you're going to fill out a different tax form, and that creates layers of complexity. But literally, you don't have to register anything at the courthouse. You're also probably going to want to do what's called a PA 100, which is where you kind of get your business up and running with the government there. And then if you're going to have employees, you've got to get stuff like workers' compensation in place and all those good things, or else you can get in trouble. So it probably is a good idea to sit down with a lawyer. Now, Steve Snyder in my office, as a matter of fact, does this for folks. So,
all right. I'll go contact him Monday then.
Yeah, and the other thing I just want to make sure you know is, obviously, you don't have to have a lawyer to start the business. And one of the things that you and the lawyer got to talk about is cost. But for the cost of doing it right versus all the problems we see, I sometimes wish people would have spent $500 or $700 on the front end setting everything up the right way, as opposed to coming in to see me going, well, I was working for this guy, and then I had this other guy who was my subcontractor, but now the state's trying to say that he's not really a subcontractor, and I owe $200,000 in back workers' compensation tax or premiums. And you're like, well, let's talk about how you set this up and what sort of things did you require from your subs, end quote, and were they really subs or were they statutory employees? So, I mean, it's just all those sorts of considerations that come into play that I like to sit down with somebody who's starting out a business and just give them some things to think about. All right?
Sounds good.
All right, David. Oh, the other thing is you're going to need a contract. If you're going to be doing work for people, you got to protect yourself, and you're going to want to have a good contract. And, of course, a lot of these handyman-type jobs sometimes require 3-day rights of rescission, et cetera. So I'm not the expert on this stuff, but I at least know that there's some stuff that we have to worry about. All right?
Very good, sir.
All right.
And
I'm too fast with that button. 540-0580. David, thank you very much for calling. I apologize I cut you off before you got a chance to say anything else. But, yeah, the concept there is if you're going to start a small business, I don't care whether it's retail, service, whatever, there are tax considerations, there are legal considerations. Are you going to have standard contracts? Are you going to be developing some kind of intellectual property? If you're a disc jockey, are you going to have people working at shows for you, and are they going to start stealing weddings from you? How are you going to prevent that? I mean, these are just all the things that come up. 540-0580. I'll see you guys after the break. Hey, welcome back. Carl Rominger here answering your legal questions, 540-0580. And I want to remind you, when you get a chance, to go to RomingerLaw.com if you want to learn more about our law firm, or go to weekendappointment.com if you want to post questions for the show, etc. And I think Shane's in the process of getting Steve on the air here. I'm not sure. Steve Snyder, a lawyer in my office, just called. He must have heard his name and decided to pop in. Shane, is that him on the, let's see. Steve.
Yeah.
Hey, you're on the air with Carl Rominger. How are you, brother?
Good, Carl. How are you?
Good. For people who don't know, Steve Snyder works with me in our office. Of course, we're in Chambersburg, we're in Lancaster, we're in Carlisle, we're Dauphin County, wherever we need to be, right? Mm-hmm. So, did you hear a little bit of the show? Did you hear me talking to the other person who wants to start
Carl,
a business?
I did. Actually, I heard the gentleman call in about starting a business. We actually do quite a bit of that here, and as you mentioned, it's always nice to talk to somebody on the front end when they're starting a business. There are a lot of things that can be done, I think, from the beginning to help make sure that we don't have problems down the road. You talked about forming an LLC. I think the first thing somebody needs to do when they're going to start a business is figure out how they want to structure the business. And I think the LLC is nice. It's in that it protects personal assets from lawsuits. So if you're a contractor and you build a home for somebody and for some reason or another the person gets injured as a result of work that was done, they can sue the business, the LLC, the limited liability company, and if the contractor actually is liable and does lose a suit, his personal assets, his home, his bank accounts, things like that are protected. So I think first of all, I think that's very important. The other thing that I like to talk to folks about, particularly if you're getting into business with somebody else, is a partnership agreement. When two friends go into business together, they start the business, and everybody's friends, and we hope that it stays that way. But as you go through a business life cycle, things come up. You may have disagreements about the way the business should go, or let's say, for example, one of the partners passes away, and then automatically the living partner is now in business with the deceased partner's spouse or the estate, and so.
Right.
One thing we do is we like to sit down with folks before they get started and talk about all of the possible things that could come up as they continue to do business, and decide when those things come up. Let's talk now, while everybody's still communicating, about how we'll handle that. Sometimes the partners will buy life insurance so that if one partner dies, the other partner's estate gets paid their share of the company. Maybe a partner decides he wants to bring his son in, and the other partner may or may not agree with that, and things like that. So these partnership agreements are very important, and again, it's the kind of thing that you want to do starting out, and not once you're down the road and these problems come up. So those are the kind of things that I think people should be thinking about. And the other thing that you mentioned, one of the other things is contracts. I time and time again get involved with small business people who are having difficulty collecting a debt that they are owed or getting paid for work that they've done. And when I have the opportunity to look at the contracts, I think to myself, boy, I wish you'd have come to me before you started using these contracts.
I've had that thought a few times.
Yeah.
Let's take a few callers, Steve. Can you stay with me and take a few?
Yes, absolutely. Look forward to it.
Sue, you're on with Steve and Carl. You have a roof issue.
Yes, we do. We live in a townhome, and it's run by a big-known association. And we had a roof that has been leaking, so we went ahead and put the paperwork in, submitted to get a new roof put on. Well, they approved it. Well, then they turned around, and I got a phone call from the president of the place that we live at, and he apparently started chewing me out because I had to put an IKO shingle on my home and not the GAF shingles that we got approved for. And then he started threatening me. He goes, "You can only use IKO," and I'm like, we did some investigation on IKO and found out there was they've got some pending lawsuits against the company not standing behind their product. That's why we went with the GAF shingle. It's a much better product. And this place is trying to tell us that we can only put one kind of shingle on. I'm like, I think that's borderline illegal. I'm paying this mortgage. I want a decent shingle on my roof.
Right. So, Steve,
and these people really I don't get it.
Steve, what do you think about that?
Well, I'm assuming that you're in some kind of a community where there are restrictive covenants, indeed, restrictions.
Yeah, they tell you that if you have something on your front, if you leave a broom on your front porch, I can guarantee you will have a letter in the mail within a couple of days. Well, even if you left it out there for a couple hours. That's how picky they are.
Uh-huh. Well, those types of agreements are always difficult if you're trying to do something that the agreement doesn't provide for, but they also protect you for making sure that your neighbor doesn't let his house get dilapidated or park a camper in his front yard or stuff like that. But first of all, when you're involved in disagreements like that, you want to read your documents. You want to read your neighborhood association documents and determine whether you've complied with what's being done. My guess is that the thing with the shingles is that they want everybody's house to have the same color or texture of shingle or something like that, because they're trying to keep a certain aesthetic quality to the home. Are your shingles different looking than everyone else's?
Well, as of right now, they are, because we obviously need a roof.
Yeah.
We went with the same color that they had asked for. They wanted weatherwood. That was the color we had chosen. Sure. And we even had a meeting with them. We tried to explain to them that even if, we put a roof on now, weatherwood, and a month later our neighbor put on the same, shingle, it's not going to be the same color, because they can't guarantee the same color. It's not going to come out the same. You know what I mean?
So let me ask it this way, Sue. or Steve, maybe wanting to.
Yeah.
This would be something where basically what we would need to do, if I'm just thinking this through, is to take a look at the homeowners association bylaws, agreements, covenants, and see whether or not they're in fact correct that they can force the type of product you use, or whether or not there's some wiggle room for equivalent products. And it's going to be one of three answers. One's going to be you're right, one's going to be you're wrong and they're right, or the other one's going to be you're both kind of right and it's a gray area. And then the question is who wants to spend how much money to figure that out.
Right.
Yeah, and maybe it's something where you can negotiate some kind of an agreement or something along those lines.
Yeah, we tried to reason with them, and and when we went to the meeting, and we explained to them that because there's townhomes that are across the street from us, they get to choose 3 different kinds of shingles, but it's run by the same association and the same president that we have. So
interesting.
We can't figure it out.
So,
it was real interesting, and we tried to explain that to them, and
Sue,
the 84-year-old guy won't let us alone.
What we need to do, Sue, is get your documents, and probably Steve would have to sit down with you and look them over.
Sure.
All right, that would be wonderful.
All right, just go to RomingerLaw.com or call us 241-6070. That's the office number, 241-6070, and set something up with Steve, okay?
All right, thank you so
Thanks,
much,
Sue.
Carl.
Sure.
Bye-bye.
Let's see. This is the other Sue. You have a question about an estate.
Yes, this is Sue. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm a little nervous. This is the first time I've ever done this.
That's okay. We don't bite.
I would like to know what's involved in filing an affidavit for a small estate. My brother passed away in May of 2011.
Okay.
Now, right now, he has outstanding debts. Now, I did pay his funeral expenses and his rent. That's all that I paid. What he has is his Social Security, which they took back once they found out that he was deceased.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's that death benefit, but my dad is deceased and my mother's deceased. There are no other surviving children except myself.
Does he have any assets, your brother?
The only thing he has is a $500 rebate from the state on the rent.
Yeah. And so, but the estate debts are more than what the estate's worth?
Yes.
Then I would advise you to do nothing.
Okay.
In other words, and I know sometimes that bothers people, they go, I'd really just like to pay off. Listen, if one of the creditors is truly aggrieved, they can open the estate and collect a little bit of assets that are there. Mm-hmm. And although, Frank, the answer is, you probably be entitled to some of that money to reimburse you for the burial expenses because that comes up high in the thing. But here's the problem: opening the estate and the filing fees are a couple $100. Mm-hmm. Blah blah blah. So by the time you're done, to find $500, it's not going to be worth your time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now with the Social Security, because that was his, that he was entitled to, where does that go then?
Yeah, it goes nowhere. It just escheats to the state at some point.
Mm-hmm.
If nobody,
like a non-claimed money then? Yeah,
and ultimately an estate would have to be open to get it out. But I guess my thought on the matter is, and Steve, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm just thinking that for as simple. Or it's not as simple as you would think it would be just to open a basic estate and doing that. You still have to do enough rigmarole and pay enough filing fees that if we're talking about $500 or $700 net, it's not worth your time.
Yeah, when you open a estate, there's a lot of work that has to be done. You have to send letters to any possible creditors and things like that. So there's quite a bit of work, and as Carl mentioned, there's filing fees and things like that. So yeah, I think you're right, Carl. If it's an estate with no assets, there's no house or anything like that, I think you're right, Carl. I think the thing to do is just let it go.
So it would be worthwhile for me to just leave well enough alone rather than try and do it. Now, what about an inheritance tax, an insolvent inheritance tax? Would he have to?
No, there's no inheritance tax on an insolvent estate, although technically there's inheritance tax return to be filed, but nobody has to do that.
Okay, so it's not regulatory. Now, the second question I have is, what is the time limit to do probate on any estate?
Well, theoretically, you're supposed to start it expeditiously, and the tax return is supposed to be done within 6 months of death, if I remember right, unless good cause shown. So, but the long and short of it is, if you think about it, there might be reasons why you never start probate because you don't think there's an estate at all, and then later there is. So that does happen sometimes where we've actually seen where you don't even have a reason to open an estate until years later.
Yeah, the one benefit, if there is an estate with some assets or some financial resources, and there are taxes due, there's a discount if you file the taxes, and I forget the deadline. Carl, you may remember, it may be 90 days. You get a discount on the taxes. So that would really be the only thing that you would put a time limit on when you wanted to open up an estate.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Sure.
All right, Sue, you take care.
You know, Carl, I was thinking, I'm amazed at the number of people that I talk to that don't have wills, or I get contacted by somebody who has a family member that's on their deathbed. In fact, I just had one this week where somebody called me and they're not sure if their father's going to make it through the weekend, so it's the kind of thing that people don't like to think about, and so they put it off and they put it off. One of the things that I do for folks is I do a 3-document package, which includes a will, what's called a medical directive or a living will, and that's where you would sit down with your family and decide if I should become completely incapacitated, there's no chance of reviving me, what do I want the doctors to know about any treatment or the lack of treatment if I don't want them to keep me along. If that document is not in the package, doctors are obligated to continue to keep somebody on life support, and so there's that. And the other thing is what's called a durable power of attorney, and that, again, is a document that provides that if I am taken ill and I'm unable to make decisions or handle my finances, I've chosen somebody that automatically would take over that for me, and I think that there's a lot of peace of mind if you get that done before things start to happen, before somebody starts to have medical problems, and so we look forward to working with people on that.
And you trust me, I try to stress on this show all the time that people need to do that. Steve, hold on with me through the break. I want to keep you through for at least another caller because I got a guy, Jim, that's going to be holding. He's going to talk about a 5-way partnership. So hold on after the break here.
Look forward to it.
540-0580. Carl Rominger here with Steve Snyder from my office answering some legal questions. Hey, welcome back. Carl Rominger here answering your legal questions. 540-0580. I've got Steve Snyder from my office. Steve, let me see. I'm going to go right to Jim. Jim, you got a question about a partnership.
Yeah. Hi, Carl. Hi, Steve.
How are you?
Good. Hey, my folks are 20% holders in a commercial property that was passed down to them through a will. It's worth about $5 million, and they do not. Oh, I'm sorry. It's managed by one of the members. They're all siblings. Unfortunately, this gentleman is not interested very much in seeking professional help. I mean, you have to drag them to get an attorney's opinion. You have to drag them to get a commercial appraisal, that kind of thing. And I'm just curious, with regard to, I guess, fiduciary responsibility, if he what is his obligation to get professional help versus just winging it? And
is there a partnership agreement?
Well, there's an LLC set up, and they're all 20% holders.
Okay. Well, it first would control. So I mean, whatever it says controls.
Is this an Inc. or an LLC?
An LLC.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, all the partners have an obligation. They have a fiduciary obligation to the company, and so it's difficult when there's no managing partner, but each partner has the right to ensure that the other partners are working for the benefit of the company.
Yeah, maybe I wasn't clear. There is a managing partner. It is the one sibling. Unfortunately, they're all elderly. He's one of the youngest ones. He's able to articulate a little quicker than the others, but yet he doesn't recognize his own limitations as far as knowledge of the law and things like that. And so when I push him on my parents' behalf to, hey, you really should run this by an attorney, he says, that's just a waste of money.
Pound foolish, right?
Right. So I don't know what his obligation is to them. Can he just, make the decision, hey, I'm not going to contact an attorney, or...
Well, I think that's an interesting question. First question is why is he the managing partner? Is that something that everybody voted on, or is that in the agreement somewhere?
Everybody voted on it about 10 years ago, and they didn't realize until recently how big of a mess this thing has become.
So they could get together and put somebody else back in charge, or they could agree to take it out of control themselves and hire a professional manager as well.
Well, again, unfortunately, they're all elderly, and they while they think there are problems, they still have their faith in this guy. Right. Whereas my parents are the only ones really that are standing up and say, "Wait a second, we need to go outside and get some help."
And your parents have the right to. There are actions you can file for an accounting. There's actions they can file to wind it down, depending on the agreement. I mean, there's tools you can use to force, as a minority entity or interest in the entity, to force the majority to pay attention to you and potentially. Perhaps.
Oh, okay. I guess that's what I was looking for.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's absolutely things we could do.
Okay. Is there a name? What did you call that?
Well, you could under the partnership law or under the LLC law or under the corporate law, depending which subsection of the code you're going to go under. There's different tools like an accounting, the right to force. Basically, where you say you're not doing something right and you're violating your fiduciary duty and want to see what we spent on what and why. Or perhaps, depending on the agreement, we need to see the master agreement, there may be a way to wind down or force a sale of the property, potentially even, or winding out of your parents' interests in it.
And that's where they've decided to wind down and take it to sale. But again, it's $5 million property estimated, and he feels there's no reason to get a commercial appraisal because, hey, it's worth what we ask for it.
Yeah, but boy, if you have a business that's worth that kind of money, I can't imagine anybody not getting some legal advice. That's a significant.
You're not getting legal advice, not getting an appraiser. Maybe are they using a professional realtor?
No. He just feels he's going to let these other folks that are interested in buying it. He'll give them a price, and they can take it or leave it.
Right, and maybe it's too low. That's the other possibility.
and that's just it.
Yeah.
And that's why I wondered what his fiduciary responsibility is.
Well, he technically does, but of course the other people have to assert it. And so, you don't violate your fiduciary responsibility if everybody else in the partnership's happy.
But if one of the 5 people expresses the concern, can they force?
They can certainly force the issue. The question is whether or not they're going to be overruled and what the structure of the organization is. But again, I mean, I did this one time. I had a corporation with 2 partners in it who were fighting, and we pushed it into a form of receivership and basically were able to take complete control of the corporation on an emergency basis, which gave us the leverage we needed to negotiate the buyout we wanted.
Okay.
All right, Jim.
Okay. Hey, thanks.
Just some thoughts. Hey, if you want to get hold of Steve off the air, feel free. Just go to romingerlaw.com, okay?
Will do. Thanks so much.
All right, brother. 540-0580. Doug, you're on with Carl and Steve. Hey, Doug.
Hey. Hello.
Hey.
Well, I have a question about my job. I work on the maintenance staff at a local high school, and with this state of emergency that we just had, we are told by our boss that we're allowed to get to work because that is a designated Red Cross shelter, and if we get stopped anywhere by police that we're not allowed to be in the road, we're supposed to show them our ID badge, and that will get us through to the school. And I was wondering if that's true or if that's just a bunch of smoke.
I got no idea. I have no idea.
Because what happened was we had this last storm we had this week, we had some employees that got stopped, and they showed them their ID badge, and the cop said that means absolutely nothing to him.
Right.
So, and in the same thing, they were not letting people leave the school. The teachers and staff were not allowed to leave the school by order of the police. So they weren't letting people out in the road from the school district, yet our boss is ordering us in there to work.
And I don't know the answer to that, except that I don't think your boss can overrule the state's emergency proclamation. So the officer's probably right when he says it doesn't mean anything to me. On the other hand, if there was some communication with the police or the people that are the gatekeepers, maybe they could, they would know that somebody's essential. So,
yeah, I think maybe a phone call to the police department and try to get some understanding before you run into a police officer on the street that's just trying to do his job is probably in order.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, man. Sorry we
Okay,
can't
thank
answer
you.
that one.
All right, thank you.
Bye. Yeah, state of the emergency, martial law, that's not really my specialty. Megan, you're on with Carl and Steve. Hey, Megan.
Oh, hi. I was wondering, do you do any law up against the State Board of Nursing? Like if you lost your license and you're allowed to reapply and you have to have counsel?
The short answer is I have not done that, but if you contact me off the air, I will refer you to a woman that I know who does that kind of work.
Okay.
All right? Just send me an email or call and ask Tammy in my office, and she'll kind of scratch her head and say, I'll have to ask Carl, but I know exactly who to send you to because she's actually a lawyer and a nurse. How's that sound?
Okay.
All right?
Thank you.
Not a problem. All right. What else we got here? Greg, you're on the air with Carl and Steve. Greg.
Hello, yes.
Yes, you're on the air, my friend.
Okay. I had a question about the payoff of my mortgage.
Okay.
Back in July, I sent a final payment in, and I was wondering, am I supposed to be getting any more paperwork from these folks? I never got any acknowledgement or anything.
They should do a satisfaction piece at some point.
Yeah, I've gotten nothing from them except they did return my escrow payment, so they gave me a check back for the money that I still had in escrow with them.
Gotcha.
So from there, I've seen absolutely no paperwork from them at all.
Have you called them?
I did just request my credit report, and on the credit report, it's showing as being paid in full.
Mm-hmm. What county?
This is in York County.
So the only other thing I would do is check the courthouse and make sure that a satisfaction was filed, which will show that the mortgage is not showing as a lien on the property any longer. If they don't do that, then I would send them a letter demanding it, because there's a statute that says once you demand it, they only have so long to do it, and the longer it takes, the more money you get back on the mortgage you paid.
Okay.
And you can get back quite a bit of money if they don't satisfy it upon repeated demand. So.
Okay.
So I would check on that, and if they haven't satisfied it, and if you don't want to do that yourself, just call the office. I'm sure Steve is happy to write you some letters for you.
Okay.
All right?
I appreciate it.
All right, my friend. You take care.
Thank you.
Oh, I got to go to break here. 540-0580. I'll see you guys after the break. Hey, welcome back. 540-0580. I've got Steve Snyder, who works in my office, here on the line with us. He's been helping out with some questions. Steve, how do you enjoy the radio so far?
This is fun.
Let's see who we got here. We got Victor. Got a question for Steve or myself?
Were you asking for Victor?
Yeah, that's you, brother.
Yeah, here I go. Well, I'm not sure who. I've got two subjects. One's with the flood and the recent events in Harrisburg. I'm kind of looking around saying, okay, how can I contribute? And one of the things I thought of was by donating one of the features that I operate on a website, the income that would come off of that would go to the city hall. My question is there a protocol in doing that, or an accountability? You know, what recommendations would you have for me saying, hey, listen, I want to provide all the income that comes off of this feature to the city to help with the cleanup and maybe the incinerator debt. And of course, in return, being an entrepreneur, I'm looking for the recognition
right.
For the business.
Well, the short answer is taking donations is always tricky.
Right.
And so I know that, for instance, if you're going to create like a charity and you want the donations not to be taxable, et cetera, there's all kinds of paperwork you have to do on that. And
right.
if you just have the money flow through some feature you have, let's say, and Steve, you may be better able to explain this than I, but basically, like, let's say it's $5 every time somebody uses the feature. I'm just making this up. And you're going to try to say, well, I'm donating the whole $5. I'm not a tax lawyer, but I suggest that at some point a taxing body may say to you, no, you got $5, and then you donated $5, so you pay the tax on the $5 and you get a deduction on the other $5. Yeah. But those aren't straight lines, so you're still not. You're still implicating yourself on the flow through somehow. So
gotcha.
pretty complicated to set that up, particularly in short order. And I do remember when, and of course it's funny because 9/11's coming up here. After the 9/11 tragedy, Howard Stern put together a charity, and he lamented about how expensive it was because in order to create the charity and do the flow through, they ended up spending gazillions of dollars just to make it legally compliant with what they needed to do. My short answer for you is why don't you go to the Red Cross or the Salvation Army or the Bethesda Mission, one of the other big charities in the area, and tell them what you want to do and have them help you.
It's a good idea. All right. Yeah, I didn't think of the taxing. I'm thinking, run through, simple. Yeah. And, Uncle Sam wants this cut anyway, even though I'm giving it to him.
Because they're not going to look at it. They're going to look at it as, okay, you got money, and now you're donating money. They're not going to look at it as it was a donation as it came in on a business feature like that, unless you So that's the trouble. I always tell people, really what you want to do is go to the charitable experts, which are your giant charities, whether it's the YMCA, the Salvation Army, one of those who's going to be working in the area, and let them help you. Okay. All right, Victor?
Good advice. I had another question, and that was on GPS surveillance of employees. I just pulled out Hr 2168, which is legislation saying that following an employee with the GPS is going to be equivalent to requiring a search warrant or a search warrant, like wiretap.
Right.
My question is right now why there is no laws, from what I could find, is there a way to protect privacy from being followed?
Well, the short answer is I'm not aware if I don't think employers are allowed to put a GPS unit secretly on your car. But an employer is certainly entitled to put a GPS unit on property they own, including a car they own. Right. And if they're going to drive it around, that's just data that's going to be available to them. Right.
Is that data, following their vehicles one thing, but using it to follow a person? That's a gray area, well, I guess. Really.
Right, that's a gray area. But here's my question. I mean, if the company's going to use GPS data to follow a person, I mean, I guess they could use your cell phone, right? I mean, they got the Disney phone now that tells you where your kid is. So, I don't know the answer on that, and that's probably why the legislation is out there, because people are trying to define where you draw the line on that. But I would usually say, for instance, if you're on the company computer, then what you do on the company computer is probably company business. If you're on the company email account or even accessing your private email account on the company computer, probably company business at that point.
Right.
If you're in the company car.
The other thing I'm thinking of is if the company lets you know that they're going to be tracking you, then you've consented to that, to them having that information, and that's probably the way a company ought to approach it.
So, in taking that one step further, I could also send notice to the company that I'm not doing away with my right, and therefore don't.
But then they could just say we don't need you anymore, too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have to remember Pennsylvania is a employment at will state. That means that your employer can fire you for any reason that does not violate some protected right. They can't fire you because you're a woman or because you're an African American or because you're a certain religion. But if they just don't like you, they can let you go, and there's really nothing you can do about that.
Okay.
All right, Victor.
Appreciate it.
540-0580. John, you're on the air with Carl and Steve.
Hi.
How are you doing?
All right. Got a question about automobile accident.
Yes.
If your vehicle is hit by another vehicle and it's just about brand new, less than 2,000 miles on it, can you get something from the other person's insurance to say the vehicle lost value?
Yes. Yes, that's called stigma value. And as my brother, who's in the automotive scrapping industry, was just saying to me the other day, because of the way Carfax and the titling and everything works these days, the average buyer now has access to whether that car's ever been in an accident or not, and that lowers the value substantially. And so, yeah, you should not only get the cost of the repair, but you're also entitled to pursue money for the loss of value of the asset.
And
sometimes that requires an appraisal, though.
Right. Well, the question is, you get an appraisal. I got an appraisal for insurance purposes, and
well, we got two kinds of appraisals, though. We got for insurance purposes, you get an appraisal of the automobile for the repairs, right?
Right.
But this would be an appraisal of the difference in value now that the car has been damaged and what it should sell for, all other things being equal.
Right. And how, in a realistic world, what does it take to get that money from an insurance company? They obviously don't want to do that.
They don't like to pay those, and a lot of times they won't pay those, but it's amazing if you bring it up and you have a little bit of documentation, they know that it's a known damage and that it's a cognizable damage. And I know about it because I've pursued it successfully before. Here's the dilemma. Let's say you got a $20,000 car, right?
Right.
And the stigma value, it loses 10% of its value. Well, that'd be $2,000. Now it's starting to get tempting to go after, right? But a lot of times it's only going to be, say, 3%, 4%, 5%. So now you're less than $1,000 difference. You got to go pay for the appraisal. You pay $200, $300 for the appraisal. The insurance company disagrees with you. Are you going to come out ahead at the end? Well, if you're like a lot of my clients, though, you're going to be like, well, Carl, I really need the money now, not later. I need to get a new car to drive around, or I need to get this one repaired. And
so you can't repair it until you settle all claims.
Well,
correct?
Theoretically, right. That may be the issue, that they want you to sign a property injury release. And you're saying, no, I can't agree on that number. And they're like, that's fine. If we can't agree on the number, it's not us holding it up. It's our just disagreement on the number, and we're not far off from you. We're giving you a little bit for stigma value, but we want to see an appraisal or something. On the other hand, if it's a $200,000 car and you've got a 5% difference, well, then it's going to be well worth your time to get the appraisals.
Right. But, like you said, if it's a $20,000 car, $1,500, $2,000 accident.
Right.
Is it even worth the effort to go through this?
Right, but the flip side is, that's what my brother was just lamenting, that eBay now automatically pulls the free Carfax report for a person buying a car on eBay, and he was saying that's decreased the value of a lot of them because it just gives people such easy access to that data that they'll bid less for them because they see there was an accident on it.
Right. And what is the if you just sent a letter to the insurance company prior to cashing the check, because they just sent a check for the repairs.
It depends on whether the check's actually a part of a release or not. If it's part of a release, cashing the check's going to probably effectuate the release.
Exactly. So do you send them a letter and say, by the way, we think there's a stigma value here, and say,
yeah,
worth it?
Yeah, but give me a bigger check.
Right. Is it worth the effort to do that?
I think it is, but that's I think probably works better for me than it does for you. That when I call them up and tell them this is why I want money, they usually are more willing to move the needle a little bit. That's the same with personal injury. I had a police officer who was representing himself one time, and he waited till the 2-year statute of limitations and handed me over the case, and he got the insurance company up to like $6,000, and I had him up to like $17,000 2 phone calls later. And my point is, because they just figured, well, this guy's representing himself, he's not really serious about this. When I write him a letter and say, but the fact that you would understand stigma value and could lay it out and come up with a reasonable percentage, some adjusters might go, this guy's done his homework. Well, so we'll give him an extra 10%.
Now, what's interesting is
out of time, John.
Okay, sorry.
Steve, I'm going to let you go, too. Thanks for joining us for the first hour.
Thanks, Carl.
All right, take care, brother.
Okay.
That's Steve Snyder. You want to get him? He's in our office. Go to RomingerLaw.com. Look me or him or anybody of the other lawyers up, serving all central Pennsylvania. See you next hour.